If something triggers you instantly, it's not just about what happened. Hey there, I'm Natalie France, an unapologetic presence coach, and this is a space for women who feel consistently weighed down by the opinions of others. Today's topic of discussion is why certain opinions affect you instantly. Let's talk about a trigger. Triggers are very emotional and often very deep-rooted. Therefore, when someone says something about you and you are triggered by their statement, it's often less about them and more about you. Now, obviously, I talk about caring less about the opinions of others, which is a real thing. And it's very, very possible to disengage and switch off from what others say about you. But occasionally, something penetrates the surface. Occasionally, something triggers that emotional response and emotional reaction. And when you find yourself in that point, it means there's something unresolved within you that needs to be dealt with. Something that you've probably pushed deep down, and maybe into the subconscious, but you've pushed it deep down, suppressed it in some way, and something that somebody says triggers an emotional reaction from you based on an opinion you actually already have of yourself that you haven't dealt with. Whatever has been said, whatever has been triggered, the trigger for you itself could be based on something very old. It doesn't have to be something that you have recently felt about yourself. It could be something that you have felt about yourself for a long time, but you've just gotten used to masking it and covering it up. The issue with that is that when you have things within you that you don't fully deal with, you will be presented with moments, i.e. someone's opinion of you, which then unravels the trigger within you. Therefore, when somebody says something, it's not really about that moment that they've said something to you. It's about what it's revealed of yourself. So as I just said, a trigger is usually about something unresolved within you, something that's quite deep, hidden, masked, however you want to phrase that, something that you haven't truly dealt with. And it could be really old. I said it could be from a while ago, but this could be years ago. Some people have deep-rooted issues that are so far in the past that they don't necessarily remember in their consciousness, but definitely inside, there is something there that when a random opinion is made, it takes you back to that place. It upheavals that issue that you've never fully dealt with. And that's why sometimes your response can seem erratic and seem a little bit out of control. Like I said, it's not necessarily about that present moment that somebody has said something to you. It's about the wounds, the experiences that is identified within you that you haven't dealt with yourself. And the issue with past experiences and identity wounds is that when they're not dealt with, eventually they are going to rise to the surface. And they will be presented to you in a very random way. It could be anything that happens to you. It could be something you witness in a moment that makes you remember a past experience. But in the context of the opinions of others, people can say things, whether to cause harm or not, because sometimes someone can say something they think is innocent, which still brings out a trigger in you. But it's an opinion regardless. So people can say things to you, about you, however it is presented to you. And when your reaction is quite emotional, which, like I say, can come off erratic, especially when you don't realise why it's happening at that precise moment in time, and they definitely don't know why it's happening. The unresolved issue within is something that you have to deal with. Triggers, they can't stay hidden forever. You do have to eventually deal with them. And they're often very old, like I said, they're often very old and deep-rooted. But the problem is, if you keep them suppressed, they will always find their way to the surface And if you don't deal with them and they find their way to the surface, they'll just come back again. There's loads of quotes out there in the world of quote universe. And I can't remember the exact quote, but there's definitely one along the lines of, you will keep on experiencing the same thing over and over and over again until you change your behavior within that situation. And you'll keep dealing with experiences over and over again, not necessarily in the same environments, but in similar environments. For me personally, I had a corporate job for about 7 to 8 years and I hated it. I did not like that job at all. And I worked in different companies, not just in one company, not just in one role, but I didn't like the corporate experience. And so I eventually realised that I needed to leave. But I felt at the time that I needed to stay. And even when going from one company to another, from one department to another within the same company, I kept dealing with the same experiences. It took me a while to realise that actually this environment is not for me. This type of role is not for me. This experience I don't enjoy. I need to leave. I don't need to stay in this world because I have a great salary, and it wasn't even the best. It was just a decent salary. You know, I can go on holiday whenever I want. I can save for the things that I like and desire. I can save for later on in life. I fell into that rat race job of going to work and going home, going to work and going home, going to work and going home. That was also part of the overall issue. And I was dealing with workplace idiots and people who just don't have anything better to do than harass you when you're just trying to get on with your job. And it wasn't within one company. It was within any company I went to. I would do my job and somebody would have an issue with me doing a great job. Whatever it was, I would do my job and I'd go home and sleep, and I wouldn't even have a weekend. My weekends were sleeping, whatever company, whatever role it was. I kept dealing with the same experiences, the same negative experiences over and over and over again. And it wasn't until I left the corporate environment that I realised that, wow, those 8 years of just going round and round and round and round, but because I wasn't meant to be there. That environment wasn't for me. And it didn't matter what company I worked for, I kept dealing with the exact same experience. So for me, I had to remove myself from such an environment to realise I was in the wrong environment in the first place. And it triggered me, because I'd get triggered. I'd be like, why is this happening to me again? Why am I dealing with the same experience but with different people in a different workplace? It triggered things within me that were unresolved. And some of that unresolved issue was me believing that I had to have a 9-to-5 job in order to earn a living, in order to live a decent life. Whereas now I'm a freelancer and I still live a decent life. And although I do work for other people, I also have the freedom to work for myself and do things on my terms. And I'm not sat in an office in a 9-to-5 job that ends up being 9 to 6, 9 to 7. I'm not having to do the daily commute on the London Underground, which is a nightmare for most of us when you have to do it. And more so, I'm not dealing with colleagues who are just venomous snakes who mean nothing to me. I still come across people every now and again that, you know, I could do with avoiding in terms of like the work space, the work environment. But it's not the same as being stuck at a desk and having to see the same faces day in and day out who have the same mean ways for like 2 years of your job. So my point is, with experiences that you keep coming back around to you, experiences that keep circulating back around to you, especially when it comes to an unresolved issue, a trigger, if you don't ever deal with that issue, it will always find its way back to you. The universe has a way of making you experience the same thing over and over and over again until you realise something needs to change. And the thing that needs to change is you and your behaviour. So when people are presented with an issue that triggers them, with an opinion from somebody else of them that triggers them, a lot of the times, as I say, they will react immediately, and the reaction is often very emotional. It's an emotional reaction. that emotional reaction can come out in different ways. It can come out as anger, it can come out as even being so overwhelmed that you start crying, or you sound like you can't control how you're reacting. But whatever it is, the reaction is often immediate, because when someone triggers something that's very deep within you, you don't take a moment to understand what's wrong within you. You just react because they've done something wrong in your eyes to you. And I've said many times before, when it comes to opinions of others, before you react to them, take a moment of stillness, of silence. Silence is often the best response, but I appreciate there's opinions that people will say about you that have no relevance to you, and those are the ones where it's easy to be silent and just be like, whatever in your mind, and get on with your life. But when it comes to opinions of you that actually another trigger that you have within yourself, those are the ones where the emotional reaction is going to probably seem a little bit like, wow, what happened? Why are they responding like that? Even though someone said something, your reaction can still be like, oh, well, that seems a little bit out of sorts. Why would they react in that way? But you have to also understand that your reaction is truly based on something that you haven't dealt with. So when you speak from a place of emotion, when you react immediately, and then you seem a little bit out of control and agitated, the perpetrator actually doesn't understand any of that. And that can be quite frustrating, is that somebody has said something to you, someone has made an opinion of you, and they don't even realise that your reaction is based on what they said, because they're so in denial about offending you that they don't gauge your reaction is about what they've said. But what's even worse is that you now haven't realised that your reaction is not only based on something that they've said, but based on something that you haven't dealt with within you. And then when you react, whether it seems like you're angry or that you're emotional, however you react, that reaction will seem bigger than what it might be to them, but also it will potentially come across as you being out of control or losing control of yourself in that situation. And then you will therefore look to regain control of yourself and the situation, and it just becomes this very negative spiral of events based on what they've said, but what you haven't dealt with within. So then how does one deal with such situations? What do you do when somebody says something about you, but it's deep rooted and it's triggering? What do you do? What's a shift in those moments? It's not about eliminating triggers, but it's learning not to respond to them. As I've said many times before, as I said a moment ago, silence is often the best response. Take a moment to pause, regardless of how the opinion has triggered or possibly not triggered you. It might be one that has or hasn't triggered you, but regardless of the trigger, take a moment to pause before responding to anybody's opinion of you. Pause and breathe. Pause and breathe. Take note of the situation. Observe the situation. Always ask yourself as well, does this require my reaction? Because most things don't. Most things do not require you to react. You may think you need to react, but most things do not require your reaction. They require you to reflect, but to reflect in silence. It's also important to separate what's happening in that moment from what's happened in the past. Because even when you are presented with the same thing over and over and over again, and yes, it does mean that you have to change your behaviour in some ways, so I will always stand by that. But you also have to remember that a past experience is not always the same as a present, even if it's the same topic, same theme. Because the person you're dealing with now is not the same person you were dealing with before. They may have similarities, and they most certainly have said something similar that's triggered you, but they're not the same person. And I think a really good way for me to explain this is when one enters a relationship, you should never bring baggage from a previous relationship into a new relationship, because you're automatically suggesting that the person you're about to start seeing is going to do negative things like the person, your ex, that you previously saw. A lot of people, a lot of women, I've got to be honest as well, often take a negative experience from a past experience into a new relationship, and that means you've already tagged your new partner with things that he hasn't done, or she, depending on who you are, but that they haven't done. It's the same when being presented with the opinions of others, especially the ones that trigger you. Yes, it has triggered something that is from the past and that is unresolved within you, and that is quite a sore subject for you. However, whoever has said something today is not the same as whoever said it before. The experience for you might be the same, but the perpetrator is not. Therefore, if you have been triggered, it always says more about you than unfortunately it does about them, because you have something within you that you have to sort out. So it's actually pointless reacting to who has said what in that moment, because one, all that is an issue with them based on an opinion they have of you, which is their business. Their opinion of you is none of your business. It's always their business. It's always their problem, their thing. But it doesn't actually resolve the issue you have within. So even if you react to them today and give them a piece of your mind, however you choose to do that, that issue, that trigger within you still exists. Therefore, it doesn't make any sense to react to them. It doesn't change how you feel about yourself based on a trigger. So the best thing to give them is silence, move on with your life, but also be honest with yourself about what you have to deal with within. You definitely have to learn to create the space between the trigger and the response. Okay, so yes, you must create space between the trigger and the response. It doesn't matter what someone says about you. It doesn't matter if it's something you believe of yourself or you don't believe of yourself. Your response is always the same: to pause and be silent. Okay, pause and be silent. Not every invitation to reaction deserves a reaction. And yes, you'll probably be more likely to want to react to the ones that do trigger you. But again, ask yourself why. Because if you ask yourself why, you'll know instantly that actually it's not about them. They've unfortunately presented you with something that you need to deal with, but it's not about them. And maybe the universe has put you in that situation on purpose, but it's not about them. It's not about them. So it's got to be you creating space between a trigger and the reaction. Reaction to them should be nothing. Reaction to yourself and dealing with that unresolved trigger should be everything. Go away and deal with the deep-rooted issue you have within, so that you stop feeling the need to react to somebody who's saying something that brings you back into that space, into that place. Otherwise, you'll be reacting for the rest of your life, and what you won't do is deal with the real issue, you. So I guess what I want to end on today is, and I kind of alluded to it a moment ago because I did talk about this in a previous video, but not everything that moves you needs a reaction. Some things, they just need your awareness to go away and deal with them. But as always, presence over explanation. Come back to yourself rather than being pulled into the opinions or expectations of others with the Unapologetic Self-Love Journal. Available to purchase at Amazon. See links below.